Technology is revolutionizing education. Have you heard that statement? Do you agree with that statement? If you were to ask me, I don't think technology is revolutionizing education. I think it did revolutionize education. Back in the 15th century when Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press, what this technology made possible was textbooks such as Euclid's Geometry, one of the first textbooks and one of the most widely printed textbooks ever, written in 300 BC, was able to be distributed in the 15th century. The thing that fascinates me most about Euclid's Geometry is that it's an amazing work from a mathematical perspective, but it left so much room for improvement. I don't think most people think about a book as technology because, to quote Douglas Adams, who actually is quoting Bran Ferren, technology is a word that is used to describe something that doesn't work yet. I mean, take the chair in the background there. We don't think of the chair as technology because a chair just works. When it was designed and developed, I'm sure people thought of it a little bit more like technology because when they would sit on it, it'd break, and so it was something that had to be developed. And I think it's a really apt description of technology, if not a really good definition of it. Of course, one of the other technologies that really revolutionized education, the pencil. But nobody seems to want to talk about the pencil. Of course, to deny the benefit that having a writing device with which students could make mistakes, erase their mistakes, and then try again is really a pretty useful tool. But I heard a comedian once talking about the pencil. It's like the pencil is only something that is used during school. Nobody as an adult walks around saying, "Hey, do you have a pencil?" But it's an amazing piece of technology. My name is Joshua Johnson, and I'm going to take you through a little bit about technology and the intersection with learning. The apps that I describe at the end of this presentation are all available at joshedtech.com/apps. But before I get into that, let me tell you a little bit about myself so you know where I come from. When I was really young, probably kindergarten and a little bit before, my father had been kind of tinkering around with computers. I remember an Atari that wasn't a game system, a computer in our house. But I vividly remember when my father brought home the IBM PC Junior. He put it in our kitchen. It was the only place that we had kind of like an office area. And I remember just being fascinated by the computer and the things that I was able to do. My father was fascinated too. He bought me books on how to code and do BASIC. And to be quite honest, I thought it was kind of fun, but it was really just copying words from the book into the computer screen. I didn't really know what was going on. It wasn't until probably about my third, fourth grade year in grade school that computers really got me excited, but not because of the potential for education, simply because I wanted to play video games. I remember in school when the very first computer was added to my classroom when I was in 6th grade. And of course, as anyone from that time period knows, it existed for one thing. To kill me from dysentery by playing Oregon Trail. Now, I'm not saying that the Oregon Trail wasn't a great educational project or product and had a lot of educational applications. To me, it was just a game. My high school curriculum consisted of learning to type. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog over and over and over again. Now, we had other sentences, but if you didn't know the fascinating thing about this sentence, it has every letter of the alphabet in it. It wasn't until I was in college in 1995-96 that I got my first email address, and that's when the internet was really just starting to blossom. I remember going home and my father had put together a website, and I was fascinated by the concept that I could make something that would go onto what was this internet or World Wide Web, and other people could see it. But my first cell phone didn't come until about 1998, 1999 when I was a junior in college. I think I had it for about a year, then I lost it, so we canceled the plan, and I didn't replace it again until 2001, probably my second year of actual teaching. I remember in college getting my first laptop. It was fascinating to me because it was I think the first laptop that I'd ever physically touched. I knew nobody else that had a laptop. Again, I credit my father. He realized that for me to do work, and I was going to be off student teaching in different schools, I was going to need a way to get my work done and put those things together. Now, I tell you all these things just to give you a little indication about what school was like for me. And I've been in school literally all my life. Started when I was 4 years old. I'm still in school today, whether it's going to classes or teaching classes. And I'm going to say this really flatly. I do not think that my education prepared me for the world that I work in today. Now, I don't want to sell them short. I do think my schools did an excellent job, but it wasn't in preparing me with all the technology and the things that I am interacting with on a daily basis. Instead, school just taught me how to learn. And because of that, I realized that really one of the primary focuses of technology is to help people learn and to help them learn on their own. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the broken promises of technology, especially from my perspective as a teacher. Technology was supposed to make my life so much easier. I was going to have more time to do the things that I wanted to do because technology was going to make things a little bit better, a little bit more efficient. Reality was that everything down to my lesson plans now had more boxes that I had to fill and more things that I had to think about. Instead of making my life easier, it seems to have frustrated me more. In my classroom, technology was supposed to be a way to engage my students. And I look at a picture like this and I think, are the students truly engaged in learning activities or with the learning goals and outcomes, or are they just engaged with a device? Quite frankly, in most classrooms, my own included, I feel like the teacher is the only one that is truly engaged. The teacher is the one using the technology, and in a lot of times probably misusing the technology. I love this slide because to me it just says so many different things. It shows a teacher in front of a board just filled with knowledge. But I'm not sure. I think the chalkboard is an amazing example of technology, and it has served its purpose very well, but I don't know if this is the best use of the chalkboard. I don't know how well this is, or I don't know how engaging this is to students. Technology did bring a world of information. That's one of the things, a world of information at my fingertips. That was one of the promises of technology, and I think it has. But the problem has been really kind of promoted lately, how much of that information is true. I mean, to be quite honest, anyone can write a blog or a website or publish something that looks true. I mean, we had an entire election scandal about fake news. Technology brought a lot of information, but whether or not all that information was good, I suppose that remains to be seen. Technology was supposed to connect people, bring people closer together. I see a picture like this, and I'm sure they're connected with someone, they're connected with something, they all seem to be enjoying themselves, but I do believe to a lot of people, technology seems to have isolated individuals in front of their screens. So with all these promises of technology, making it work is something that it's possible. It's very doable, but it's got to start from a different place. We focus too much on the what of technology, on the apps and the tools, and we've kind of lost sight of the why for technology. I'll pull up a slide for Simon Sinek's book and make a plug for him, The Golden Circle. Start with why. It really has to begin with understanding why we're using technology. Then we can move out to how are we going to use technology in the classroom, and finally consider what, like the actual technology that we're going to use. But it's got to start with why are we using it in the first place. I suppose one of my favorite reasons for understanding why we use technology comes from just a giant in education, John Dewey, who said, education is not preparation for life, education is life itself. And I just have to say that this really speaks a lot to me because I believe in developing personal learning networks. I want both teachers and students to develop a way to consume and think about information, to think critically about it, to analyze it, all of those things. I want them to develop a way that works for them. Now we talk about differentiation in education quite often, and I do believe technology has allowed us to truly start to differentiate some of the learning opportunities that we have. Take a look at this slide. This is the 21st century skills. If you put it in Google, you'll find tons of infographics and lists of 21st century skills. The problem is, not everyone seems to agree on what those 21st century skills are. One of the most common models that I see being used in schools is the 4 C's of 21st century skills: critical thinking, communicating, collaborating, and creating. The things that stand out to me about both of these slides, and what stands out to me about the next one, is how much of these are related to Bloom's taxonomy. We've updated Bloom's taxonomy just a little bit in recent years, really to make room for the very top of that pyramid, which has become creating, using all of the things that we normally think about higher level thinking, and then the very highest level is to be able to create. I look at the ISTE standards, the International Society for Technology and Education, and I see all of these things that are promoted as these are the standards for use of technology in the classroom. And the thing that I notice most about them is that they really don't look like technology standards. Instead, they look like the things I've been trying to do with my students throughout my entire education, both as a student and as a teacher. I'm trying to teach students how to think, I'm trying to teach them how to learn, I'm trying to teach them how to relate to each other, to communicate with each other, to build knowledge, really to look at Piaget and Vygotsky and understand that knowledge has to be created, and it's based on background knowledge and prior knowledge. So bringing all of those things together, I look at the standards for technology and I'm like, man, these just look like standards for education, just broad standards about what we want students to be able to do. So technology's focus really is on helping students think critically and analyze data. I mean, today everything is data-driven assessment, research-driven practice. I mean, everything we do is driven by data. So understanding how to use the tools to make sense of that data. Teaching students to be digital citizens, people that are going to have to communicate in virtual environments, and understand things about privacy and safety, as well as appropriate behavior. Just all of those ideas of netiquette come into digital citizenship. I do believe technology, while it might seem isolating, has developed a way for people to truly collaborate. I think about poster boards and putting a poster board together as a presentation for an assignment, and I always realize that most of the times my students weren't truly collaborating on assignments, they were just working side by side. Technology, because of the ability to undo, to delete, to move things around, to change the color, to create in new ways and then alter people's creations, to save versions of it, to go back, all of those things, just very practical ways. And through whether it's the tool itself, being able to collaborate within the tool, or because of the scaffolds that a teacher places around, and through practices like co-use and pairing and sharing and going through, technology has enabled us to collaborate. That brings me to the how are we going to use technology in the classroom. I think in the past, technology, I think of my background, technology was a skill that you were being taught, specifically taught. A computer applications class taught you how to use Microsoft Word and how to use Microsoft Excel. My typing class taught me how to touch type. And I think this kind of starts to get to the area where we notice the technology standards isn't about teaching the students how to use the technology, but exposing them to them and really allowing them to find the technology tools that work for themselves. The debate about whether or not technology has a place in a classroom, to me, and this is in my lifetime, really started with the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. When the NCTM said in 1990-91 We want all students at every grade level, we want to encourage the use of the calculator. And that triggered just a mathematical debate. If students are using calculators to do their basic math facts, then what's the point of teaching them math if they can do everything in the calculator? And I really stop and think, and I realize that a lot of times I believe a lot of teachers have misunderstood the true objective, the true learning goal in their subject area. I do think math, I've often said, I can teach someone to do algebra even if they do not know their multiplication, addition, division, and subtraction facts. If I can show them how multiplication works and understand that it's repeated addition, if we can go through and understand how the numbers behave, a calculator becomes an assistive technology tool that gives students that maybe otherwise could not memorize mathematical facts opportunities to have access to algebra in the true nature of assistive technology. So how are we going to do it? First thing, I really think you got to buy this book. Liz Kolb did just a great amount of work in her book, Learning First, Technology Second. And what she did is she developed a framework, and it was built on a couple of very common frameworks, the TPACK framework, the Technology Integration Matrix, the SAMR model, to name a few. What she noticed with those is that some of them were very practical, but they didn't really focus on the learning objectives. Some of them were great on a theoretical basis, a higher level kind of thinking idea, but they weren't practical in helping people figure out how to do this in their classroom. So she developed a framework based on those called the Triple E framework. And it really has a very simple three-pronged approach to deciding whether or not the technology being used in my class is truly helping meet goals. Meet the learning goals. And to be quite honest, as I look at a lot of these, and she says herself, you're not going to hit all three of these every time. But you want to be able to engage, to enhance, and extend learning. So what does that mean? When we talk about engaging, we're really talking about some of the same old classic time on task. We want students to be engaged with the learning objectives and not be engaged with the learning tool or distracted by it. Great example, here's a person teaching in a classroom, and here's a student in the background on the cell phone. I don't know if this is an engagement with the learning objectives or not. It's really easy for me to jump to the conclusion that this student is misbehaving and being distracted. But perhaps they're participating in a back channel chat. Perhaps this teacher has a poll everywhere going on where this student is actually answering questions, maybe asking for help. So before we jump to bad conclusions about the technology, let's just remember that the first thing that we want to do is one that probably the one area in this book that I really struggle with. We want to find technology that is going to motivate students, but I have to caution you, it's not the technology that's going to motivate the students. It's how they are using it and what they are using it for. Learning is something that motivates students. Everybody wants to learn. And yet the quote is, everyone loves to learn, but everyone hates school. So it makes me think that we must have a problem. We want technology that is going to help students focus on the learning task and not distract them with all the bells and whistles. And we want technology that is going to help make a shift from teacher-driven to student-centered. And that's really the idea in technology a lot of times, is letting students have a little bit more freedom in how they are going to demonstrate the mastery of whatever learning objectives there are. It's supposed to enhance education. Here's an example of trips or students using Google Expedition to do a virtual field trip. That's something that was possible. I could take students on field trips, but for practical considerations, would cost money, all of those things, we're now able to do things with students and help enhance and let them see what's going on in ways that we couldn't before. Too often, though, I think enhance becomes really just substitution, just taking the same educational practice, and using new technology to do it is not truly enhancing. There are some things that make this an enhancement. I'll use an example of using a game like an online quiz like Kahoot or Poll Everywhere. I could ask the questions with Poll Everywhere, but the ability to get everyone's feedback immediately and have it, the numbers crunch things, that's a small enhancement. I think that it's worthwhile. Kahoot, being able to get class participation, I think can be worthwhile because I can get immediate feedback on how my students are doing. Putting PowerPoint presentations on a board really is, I suppose, an enhancement in as much as a lot of people are visual learners, but it's still a lecture. And not that I have anything wrong with lectures. I believe that lectures can be engaging. I think that good stories are engaging. But, it's not much different than what we were doing with the overhead. And the overhead was really a slight improvement. The enhancement with an overhead projector, I could now teach with my face to the room. I could have things pre-prepared instead of having to write it all on the board. So understanding the enhancement, but really thinking about whether or not it's enhancing learning. I really think in a lot of ways the enhancement is because it gives us multiple paths to learning. I'll use an example like Khan Academy. Being able to let students work through material at their own pace. I think there's a lot of potential there in technology and helping bring that about, and just having access to all of these different places of information, but then on the other side having access to a whole new array of tools that I can use to present my findings, to demonstrate my understanding. That's where the enhancement comes in. So it's got to add value to the lesson. It needs to help make the lesson personalized, and technology should provide supports, the scaffolding that's being done to help people at different ability levels be able to perform the tasks. That's when you've reached all of those, you've truly enhanced learning. The final thing she mentioned was extending the learning. Extending really talks about taking the knowledge and the learning that is happening in the classroom and making sure that applies in authentic ways to what's going on in the real world. Too often I see the technology that we are using in our classrooms are just that. They are technologies that we would only use in our classrooms. Meanwhile, there's an entire world out there that is communicating in virtual environments, that are having, go-to-meetings, that's using WebEx and video conferencing, that are collaborating in real time with Microsoft Office or Google Docs. We've got all of these tools out there that is actually being used, and yet most of the tools that we focus on using in our classrooms are very specific. They're ones that cost the school money that the students don't have access to at home. When you start being able to bridge that gap, when students can see what I'm learning, not just content-wise, but also the skills that I'm learning apply in other ways, that's when you started to make that extension. I'll throw this one under the bus. I just hear from everyone, from business leaders to my wife to others, that we want employees that just know how to do Microsoft Excel. And here's a great example of something that to me is an extraordinarily useful piece of technology that nobody knows how to, I shouldn't say nobody, that many people don't know how to use. And I think it's kind of evidence of the fact that the technology is not going to motivate the students. In the same way that the content isn't motivating to students, it's the application of the content. It's how does this apply in the real world, in my life, and the learning that takes place. So extending the use of technology, we want to look for ways that the technology is used authentically in students' lives, skills that can be used every day in their life, and skills that are going to really be able to help them communicate, collaborate, all of those types of things as we kind of prepare students for the world of tomorrow. I mean, to be quite honest, there is no way, when I hear over and over again, we're preparing students today for jobs that don't even exist tomorrow. There's no way that I can prepare students today for technology that doesn't even exist yet. the technology that exists now, when I was in school, would have sounded like science fiction. To be able to talk to something like a device and have it tell you what the weather is going to be like, complete science fiction. But once you have armed yourself with those ideas, I'm going to show you some of the tools that I really kind of, I don't know how to say it. I find these tools to be the things that you use that can be used. Not every single one of them are ones that I think most people use on a daily basis, but a lot of them are. And I a lot of times refer to this as my bag of magic tricks. Simply because this is what most people want when I come to do professional development. They want me to share with them the tools. And I don't want to share the tools. I want to share why are you using these tools. And I want to focus on how are you going to use them before you actually start jumping into the tools. Because the tools by themselves do not enhance learning. They don't engage students. And they don't extend it into their real life. I mean, that's where the teacher has to bring in that understanding of knowing why we're using this. So without further ado, the very first one, Google Chrome. I mean, hands down, I understand that some people don't like Chrome and they like Firefox and Microsoft, but Google Chrome as an operating system has so many of these tools and has a really kind of taken a stranglehold on the market of educational applications. You have to be familiar with Google Chrome. You have to understand how to use it, how to search with it, how to bookmark, how to install extensions. One of the extensions that has to be installed, I think especially for educators, is Feedly. Feedly is a news app, but it's not a news app that brings you news that they decide on. It's a news app that brings you news in categories and from websites that you've vetted and have decided. So if there's a place that you go and you find yourself going to this site to read their take on whatever it is, it gets into the entire debate. Like, are you a Fox News or an MSNBC News program watcher? So you pick the one that you want, or pick them both and have them brought to you daily in Feedly. I love it because this is my professional learning. I can sit down with an iPad at my TV and just go through the articles. I think the Personal Learning Network is an entire topic unto itself. Google Classroom, I know a lot of schools are using it, but just understanding and knowing how Google Classroom works, the ability to assign documents that can be pre-shared with students, with specific groups of students, and take away all of the permissions and sharing back and forth. Google Classroom, it's not a learning management system. It's just a flatly easy way to coordinate things within a classroom environment. It's basically the handing out and collecting of assignments. So be careful. This could really say that you're just doing the exact same thing you used to do by giving everybody a worksheet and having them do it digitally and turn it in. ClassFlow. ClassFlow is a partner with Promethean boards. I'm really a big fan of smart boards, I think, though, that it's a technology that maybe isn't essential, but ClassFlow allows you to do some of the immediate response, to share your presentation and gather responses immediately from students, very similar to Poll Everywhere, being able to use a Poll Everywhere in order to ask a question and get those responses. Google Forms, another Google app, this one for both students and teachers, just a simple way to make a survey to collect any kind of information. I've heard about people that make a Google form that asks one question with a drop-down answer that can be used to track students as they are going through the day, to track things like interactions with students. I told John, here's an intervention. I did an intervention. Great for special education, but so many uses for it. I mentioned the Khan Academy before. Being able to use those lessons and give those to students and allow them to experience and learn at their own pace. The power of video with those lessons and some of the ways that he presents, I think, are fascinating. His book and some of his thoughts, Salman Khan, if you haven't read his book on the, I can't remember the name of it, but it's a one-room schoolhouse, I think. Just amazing, and I love his ideas about presenting lessons online. Google Drive, again, specifically Google Sheets and Google Docs. I'm leaving PowerPoint. I left slides off of this. I think people are very familiar with that. I really should leave Google Docs off this. I should focus on Google Sheets. One of the things that many people don't want to kind of look into because it seems a little old-fashioned is the idea of creating a wiki. Being able to have content that is being constantly edited by students, whether it's creating a textbook or a site or a resource site. I mean, wikis pretty much run the web now, in the sense that companies don't even provide user manuals anymore. Instead, they provide a link to a wiki that can be constantly updated by members of the company. Wikis can be used in classrooms to put together, shared resources for the entire school. Student handbooks, teacher handbooks. I really think, though, that it's a powerful tool to give students an authentic audience, allowing them to publish things that can be seen outside of their classroom. And that's where you have to start to understand what level of kids you're working with. In some cases, the audience shouldn't go beyond the school, or maybe even the classroom and the parents. Along the same lines, the new Google Sites, just an amazingly simple way to create a very good-looking website. And one of the things probably for both classroom use as well as just personal use for the educators, I've read so many articles recently that talk about the fact that all educators should be blogging. Whether you use WordPress Blogger or another one, having a blog, you're a professional, you have things to say, points of view to share, and it's really important for us to hear those. So get a blog, start writing, share it with your friends, share it with your faculty, share it with others. Adobe Spark, if you're looking for an easy way for students to create some exciting little presentations, whether they are PowerPoint-like presentations, whether it's just infographics, memes, Adobe Spark, completely free, really snappy way of putting together presentations that are exciting to watch at the end. They help polish them up, and you can focus on what needs to be said. What do your students need to tell you or tell others? This lets them tell them in a way that others are going to look at it and be like, oh, that looks good. Screencastify or Screencast-O-Matic, I didn't put that one on here as well. I picked Screencastify because it works on a Chromebook, not only for allowing educators to record lessons to flip the classroom, but especially to let students have the ability to record themselves, interview questions that they can record a 2-minute response and then share it through Google Drive. Or if students are at the appropriate age, all of those things can be shared very easily on YouTube. YouTube, both from a consumer to a prosumer. I want to consume information. YouTube has so many amazing things. Khan Academy runs off of YouTube, but also the ability to contribute and give back to the society, give back to others, have that authentic audience again. Again, depending on the age level. When you start talking about video, being able to edit video with a computer, WeVideo is an amazingly simple video editor to allow students to create their own educational videos, to put together and edit out short videos for free, up to a point. I suppose once you get to a certain point you have to pay for a subscription, but definitely a lot less money than spending it on actual video editors. Soundtrap for education, the ability to record music very much like GarageBand, again, completely online. I've heard a lot of people using this to create their own little podcasts, and then having students create a podcast about what's going on in the classroom or what's going on in different parts of the world for other students then to listen to. Edpuzzle, if you want to take your lessons and virtually put them online virtually, just to have interaction. Basically have a YouTube video that either you created or someone else created. That YouTube video can be paused, there can be annotations put over it, there can be questions, multiple choice responses, quiz type, right embedded. Those things can be saved if it's distributed through Google Classroom. You can save those responses so you can give students a video quiz with a lot of different styles or types of questions. And LastPass. I suppose this one really just for the safety and privacy concerns. Having a password manager nowadays is such a huge thing. So I didn't put it in this presentation, but just in case you're interested, back a number of slides ago I showed you Rosie the Riveter. It really wasn't Rosie the Riveter. It's the image that everyone assumes was Rosie the Riveter. This isn't actually Rosie the Riveter either, but this is the work that was published by Norman Rockwell that was entitled Rosie the Riveter. Neither of the two works, you probably recognize the other one before. This one isn't as famous simply because this one couldn't be published basically because of the copyright concerns. The other one was produced for Westinghouse Company and really only was up for about 2 weeks, but it was in 1942. This one was published in 1943, but because of the copyright use and being able to put those things into published sites, the old one really is the example of Rosie the Riveter that everyone is kind of familiar with. Just in case you're not remembering what I was talking about or remembering which slide it was, let's see. Where is Rosie? Rosie. Where are you at? Here she is. Here's Rosie the Riveter, as we know it. And you'll actually see right on here, Westinghouse Manufacturing. They were a war manufacturing company, and this was just something to do to kind of inspire workers in 1942. Norman Rockwell's 1943 was actually Rosie the Riveter. This was just an internal promotion for the company saying, we can do it. I don't even know if it's, I think it did say we can do it. We're going to roll up our sleeves, we can do it. But it became the image of Rosie the Riveter. So just an interesting bit of trivia there. Hopefully you enjoyed the presentation. Remember that you can find all of the apps that I mentioned here at joshedtech.com/apps, as well as a link to the EEE framework and Simon Sinek's Start With Why. I would recommend checking out those two books. Really important to kind of frame what you're doing in your classroom. Thank you.